work kind of fits into these categories. There's a lot of minutia here, and I guess I want to ask the folks that are following, tell me if this is okay. If you really want to learn something specific that I've mentioned, I'll go into it in more depth. If I'm going along fine. Please ask questions as I go along. The first question I had is it a viable business idea? And that's the first paper that I looked at. And if you guys look on my website, it's all in reverse date order. So at the bottom, you'll see this paper called "On the Viability of Subscription, Patrol, and Restitution Services," which I presented at the Association of Private Enterprise Education. That's APE. And the guy that I co-authored that with is Brian Drake, who's now who's an anarchist that I met through the Libertarian Party, and who is now he is now a sheriff's deputy, I believe. He got his undergraduate degree in psychology, and he went into the security field. He and I, in writing this paper, part of what we did there was we came up with some preliminary marketing research pilot questions to ask, and we went around and we asked a bunch of people questions. And of course, as I wrote it, I ended up with 1,000 questions. There were questions on the actuarial side about how do we deal with the insurance part. There were questions about legalities. There were questions about how does the patrol work. There were questions on, if this is such a great idea, how come home monitoring companies aren't doing it? How come patrol and guard companies aren't doing it? A definition of criminology is asked for by N.S. Kinsella. I don't think that's necessary at this time, but I will define criminology. It's the study of crime. And of course, the next question is, what's the definition of crime? And we all know this is a troublesome definition. So I will leave that until later, because I am working on a book where I'm going to have a whole chapter on criminology. Okay, so when I wrote this initial paper, it really set the stage for an entire research program of filling out all of these questions, and I've been working it down the line. So I next did a paper on the legal landscape of the business plan, and what I was able to do was I met someone affiliated with the Mises Institute, Carrie Ann Citron, and she and I worked together to write this paper on the legal landscape for subscription, patrol, and restitution. She was a law student at the time, and now she's a scholar at the Goldwater Institute in Arizona. The next thing I did was did a whole project on the actuarial analysis of crime, and again at the Mises Institute during intercessions I ran into Mike Blakeney, who is an actuary, and Wilton Alston, who has written for LouRockwell.com. I also worked with him on conditioning some of the data, and we did an entire paper on an actuarial analysis of the crime, and it's complicated. I'm not going to go deeply into it, but we took uniform crime report data on the incidence of crimes in the U.S., and we modeled it over time. We looked at geographic variations. We looked at the NCVS data, the National Crime Victimization Survey data, which is crimes that the UCR data is crimes that are known to law enforcement, state law enforcement. The NCVS data are collected in a completely different way. The I think it's the Department of Justice that actually does this. They have an annual survey where they call people and they say, "Were you victimized?" And they ask them a whole set of questions about it. And so it's a much clearer picture about total victimization and can account for underreporting. So we built up an entire actuarial model, and over the course of that, you'll see the next point is the behavior of subscriptions. We kind of asked the question, well, it's useful and important to know how the behavior of subscribers is over time. That is, when you first launch a subscription-based business, you will obviously be you'll start with 0 subscribers, and then as you get more and more subscribers, then it follows some sort of uptake curve, so to speak, on up to a final saturation point, which would be the total percentage of households that subscribe. And as it turns out, there's an extensive literature on this I found, and we used to model how many subscribers there are. And there's this whole section of a paper that I worked on that uses the BAS model, is what it's called. And you can, of course, find this. It's a subsection of the paper on my site under the insurance paper. The other thing I did was I did a patrol staffing paper. This was a particular, I had been looking for companies in Houston that I could possibly purchase, and so there's a state registry of companies that are regulated as patrol companies, and I did a cold mailer to a whole bunch of them with some of the papers I had written, trying to see if they would be interested in co-venturing or this sort of thing. I'm just looking and I see the feed. Oh, I see what happened. What happened was I moved something in front of the slides for a moment and it canceled it out. Okay, I'll be sure not to cover up my slides again. The slides will come back, or they will have come back by the time you hear this. When I was when I contacted various companies, I followed up with phone calls, and I ended up finding a guy who owns a patrol company here in Houston, and we worked on talking about the project over a number of months, and I got him interested in doing a patrol study and field trials. Long story short, we did the paper study, but we didn't get to the field trials, and his business got very, very busy, and he had to drop out, which is great for him. His business is going great. And so I have some more work to do on patrol. I've done a lot of marketing research. There's secondary and primary marketing research. Secondary marketing research is you contact a company like Hoover's or Dun & Bradstreet or BizFinder. There are a ton of these things, Ibis World, where you can buy. Usually for something like $500 to $1,000, you can buy a report that tells you everything you want to know about, say, the home monitoring business in the U.S. And it will lay out all sorts of things. What's the concentration of businesses? What's the market share of various businesses look like? What are the typical business models? What do their income and balance sheets usually look like? What are the drivers in the market? What are the forecasts for the demands in the market, and so forth? This is what we call secondary marketing research. So you buy a report, and you read it, and you analyze it carefully. And I've done that for the home monitoring market and for the patrol guard market. And I have a separate marketing research paper that I've written where I detail out the things that I've learned and at least come to take views on for those two major business models. And those are the two main business models that serve security in the U.S. right now. This is not taking into account, of course, things like purchasing locks and purchasing guns and owning a dog and this sort of thing. I mean, where they're going concerns that that sell security services. And then we've done some primary research. I've done 3 types of primary marketing research, and again, these are in the marketing paper on my website. The first type that I've done is to come up with a list of questions and go door to door and look for houses that have a home monitoring sign in the yard. That's what we decided. If they have a home monitoring sign in the yard, then they may be a subscriber of a home monitoring company, and therefore they have some interest in the security market, and we use that as a first pass filter for picking people to ask questions of. So we just went door to door and knocked on 100 or so doors and talked to people about home monitoring and patrol and this business model and what they thought was interesting or useful about it. And I reported that in my very first paper. Then I did further primary marketing research. I had read some more books on marketing research, and all of these marketing research books, by the way, are referenced in the papers I wrote. But any other entrepreneur, if they want some advice on what I found out about marketing research, or books to read on entrepreneurship, or anything, I'm quite willing to share that. The next step of primary marketing research we did was open-ended questionnaires that I sent to colleagues that I work with. I sent it to about 10 or 20 people. And I said, hey, I just, you can go to Google and make up a Google form. I made up a Google form of a whole bunch of open-ended questions like, what's crime like in your area? How do you handle your, these are what we call general pain points. You want to ask people what are their security concerns and what are they trying to solve, and then you sculpt your business model to meet those concerns. And then what I did was I did some primary marketing research in a mall. I purchased you can go to a mall and purchase a booth for a day or two, and it doesn't cost much. I think it cost, $500 or $1,000 to have a booth in the mall. And then I gave away $2 bills to people who would answer questions about the marketing research questionnaires that I had. And that primary research got me a lot more information, and I report on that in the second marketing research paper I have, the one that's closest to the top on my website. And then I've also done some market planning work. There's this book called Crossing the Chasm about how to structure your marketing so that you identify the segments that are interested in security, in this case in security, and how you kind of structure different value propositions for different segments, and which ones you go after first and which ones you go after later. So I've tried my best to try to answer these questions for this business model. The last 3 bullet points here I'll talk about briefly. One is on search, seizure, and arrest. From the very beginning, I've had these questions, and you can read in the academic literature, even Market for Liberty, like by the Tannehills, or in Anarchy, State, and Utopia by Robert Nozick. It's almost assumed that private security companies will have search, seizure, or arrest powers somewhat akin to state police. Now, from my legal landscape paper, I knew that, well, that's not the case right now. The private security companies don't have that at all. But I also want to kind of know, well, do I want to go after those powers? Do I want to be able to have them? And it really got me thinking, and I've reflected on it in a number of the papers I've written.